Christian Kirk will be our first must-start for Week 11. Christian Kirk has been consistent this year as a wide receiver who we predicted would be consistent as a wide receiver this year. So this, in his last 4 games, 19 points, 8 points, 14 points. Again, he had 11 targets on 6 receptions against San Francisco. Christian Kirk, when you're looking at how he stacks up against all the rest of the Jaguars wide receivers in the last 4 games, Christian Kirk has 19 receptions for 289 yards. Evan Ingram has more receptions. He has 26 receptions for 186 yards. Calvin Ridley has 6 less receptions for 13 receptions, 138 yards. Travis Etienne has 11 receptions for 131 yards. So clearly, what have we learned so far from the Jaguars this season?
That Christian Kirk was the fantasy guy to own.
He's the wide receiver 1 there. Shocking. I know. I know this is crazy. But when you're looking at the matchup for Week 11, the Tennessee Titans have given up the 7th highest points to wide receiver this year. 7th highest. So when you're talking about, number 1, Christian Kirk being in an offense where he is capable of producing, and he showed this week in and week out that he can come in, he can get double-digit targets occasionally and produce at a very high level, even when he doesn't get touchdowns. That's what we like to see in these type of receivers. He's the wide receiver 19 right now. Nice. As we say, this is a wide receiver 19. I mean, so he is a wide receiver 2. It's exactly where we predicted him to be this year. And when you're looking at the rest of the Jaguars' weapons, considerably, Calvin Ridley, who is the wide receiver 43 right now. I just want to throw that out there again because we got trashed for saying that Kirk was a better option, and we were 100% right about that. So why would you change your strategy now? Keep starting Christian Kirk. Keep putting him in your lineup. Keep playing him this week. I know he's somewhat borderline flexible and shallow in like 10-team leagues for sure. Yeah. So definitely flex him this week. Again, the Tennessee Titans, not a good passing defense, and I would expect Christian Kirk to get quite a few targets again this week. And again, if you can get a touchdown, you're talking about 20-point upside. So Christian Kirk is our first start for Week 11 this week.
Yeah, and our next start here is going to be James Conner. And I know he had a little bit of a slow start fantasy points-wise from coming off of IR, but he actually was super efficient. He just didn't get much receiving usage in his first game back. 16 carries for 73 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. Good for him. Doesn't really show much fantasy-wise, only 7 points. But, I mean, when you're looking at his opportunity, he went right back to what he was doing previously, getting 4 goal line carries, getting all of those. He got every single carry in 2-minute drill. He got all of the short yardage opportunities. He got more than half of all of the opportunities in that backfield coming off of the injury. So that's pretty impressive for him. And not to mention, this was Kyler Murray's first game back, where we have been notably thrilled, excited, ecstatic about Kyler Murray coming back and what he's going to do for everyone on that offense. Obviously, we didn't think that was going to come to fruition right away, and it showed. It only really helped Trey McBride. Marquise Brown and James Conner didn't do much. But I think in future weeks, you got to be excited about what this does for everyone, and James Conner is no exception this week, Week 11. Going into this week, we are super excited about what he's able to do. The Texans, who they are playing, have given up the 14th highest points given to running backs, and I think that paired with just the situation overall being so much better, I think one of the most important things that Kyler Murray demonstrated in his first game back is he absolutely is mobile. A lot more than
really
any of us ever expected,
actually.
Which was shocking. He looked the same,
which is
like exactly the same.
Which is great for James Conner. He was moving. Yeah. He was moving well, dude. He's moving well on the touchdown, moving well in the pocket. I mean, it was really good to see.
That forces defenses to have to worry about that dual threat in the running quarterback and in the very effective running back in James Conner. So even if his, I guess, rushing attempts go down on a per game basis, his efficiency will go up because
you saw.
They can't count on him running the ball every single play like they did when Josh Dobbs was there.
Yeah. Rashid Rice is going to be our next must-start for Week 11. And Rashid Rice, again, we talked about him kind of right after Week 9, and then they just had a bye week, so not much has changed. But in his last game, you saw 2 receptions on 2 targets, but he did get a touchdown, so he had 9.7 points. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing this with Rashid Rice. When you're looking at his opportunity share over the entire season, the percentage of offensive snaps that he's played has continued to rise. This is a good thing, and this is what you expect from a rookie wide receiver like this. It's what you're seeing from JSN. The difference is Rashid Rice is not playing with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is not playing with Patrick Mahomes, right? There's a pretty stark difference between the 2 situations. But again, when you're talking about the opportunity that he's getting, it has continued to go up. Now, nearing 75% of the offensive snaps, he's continued to be on the field for a team that in the past, when rookies haven't performed, you've seen it over and over. We saw it with Sky Moore last year. They can return punts and hardly do anything else. Yeah. But Rashid Rice has not been a case of that. When you're looking at the matchup, and again, we're picking on this team every week, especially from the wide receiver position. The Eagles have given up the most points to wide receivers this year. A staggering amount for a defense that's fairly good, especially up front. That had a fairly good secondary last year. Lost a couple guys. Now
had some injury issues.
Had some injury issues. Now they are not very good. And again, it's a team we're going to target when you're looking at some of the performances that they've given up this year. CeeDee Lamb had 28, Tyreek Hill had 25, Justin Jefferson 24, Dotson 24, Bourne 24, McLaurin 22, Crowder 22, Nakua 20. So you're talking about a number of guys there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 guys have gone over 20 points against the Eagles secondary this year. So we're going to target the matchup. We're going to pick on a guy who's continually getting more opportunity, a guy who continually is getting more looks from Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL. We're going to start Rashid Rice this week.
Yeah, we're also going to start Mike Evans, who's coming off a great week against Tennessee. 26 points, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 143 yards and a touchdown. And not going to lie, man, I'm not usually someone who says if he did this or if he did that. But Mike Evans, he literally, just in his hands, a free touchdown. There was no one in his vicinity in the end zone, and he literally just looked away, started to celebrate, and he dropped the ball. So he should have had a second touchdown here, should have had over 30 points. And when you look at what he did in that game, again, out-targeting Chris Godwin, and just keeps having some really nice games like this. And do we think this is going to slow down against San Fran? No, actually, a lot of people would probably think that Mike Evans' production would go down playing a much better defense. But how much better is San Francisco's secondary compared to Tennessee's? I mean, San Francisco has allowed the 8th highest points given up to wide receivers compared to, we just talked about Tennessee for Christian Kirk's matchup, the 7th highest. So it's basically, it's just as friendly of a matchup for him this week as it was against Tennessee. I know it's crazy to say, as good as San Francisco is compared to Tennessee overall, especially defensively, but not necessarily in the secondary. When you're looking at the wide receivers that have scored against San Francisco, the top ones, you got Jordan Addison with 31, Puka Nacua with 30, Michael Wilson, 3rd-round rookie, 26 points. Jamar Chase, 25. Marquise Brown, 16. Tutu Atwell, 15. Amari Cooper, 14. Christian Kirk, 14. I think this is kind of another situation where, if anything, if Mike Evans disappoints, his floor is about 14 points.
I think that's the case too. And a big part of this, when you're looking, Baker Mayfield's actually been serviceable. And Baker Mayfield,
he provides a lot of volume.
When you sit down and watch the Bucs games, he likes targeting Mike Evans. Mike Evans is consistently getting targets in the most important times of the game. It's been even a little bit surprising to me how much more he prefers Mike Evans over Chris Godwin.
I think he's earned himself a starting job next season.
I think he probably has.
Because they're too good to be in a position to draft a QB. I'd assume they win some more games here.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Yeah. Jerome Ford. Let's talk about Jerome Ford. This is a guy that we've been telling you, hey, don't trade for him. I don't necessarily think that if you have him, sell him. And, it's been a mixed bag of results. In the last 4 weeks, 17 points, 5 points, 12 points, 12 points. And so, I think part of this is the fact that the Steelers give up quite a bit of points to running back. They've given up the 12 points to running back this year. And when you're looking at Jerome Ford, he's consistently hovering around 60, 65% of offensive snaps. So while it is a shared backfield with Kareem Hunt, they have given Jerome Ford a slight advantage. And you can see that a little bit in the receiving game. He's gotten games of 4, 2, 7, and 1 targets in the last 4 games. Obviously, we want to see more of the 4 and 7. But again, if he's on the field for third downs, if he's on the field even just a little bit more than Kareem Hunt, he's still going to be at least somewhat flexible some weeks, especially on a week like this where we like the matchup. And again, when you're looking at Jerome Ford in the first matchup against Pittsburgh, he had 16 attempts, 106 yards, and a receiving touchdown, not to mention 3 receptions. He had like 20-something points. And
nice.
He played 3 quarters because Nick Chubb got hurt with 14 minutes left in the second quarter.
Yeah. So
a matchup, again, that Jerome Ford's already done well in this year, one time. Matchup that gives up quite a bit of points to running backs. Jerome Ford, who is hovering around 65% of snaps. I like Jerome Ford as a flex this week.
Yeah, and granted, some of that came from a single big play against Pittsburgh, but at this point in time, that's kind of what you're depending on with Jerome Ford, and I think it's absolutely possible, especially if Deshaun Watson is more like second half Deshaun Watson instead of first half against Baltimore. Trey McBride is going to be our next guy here, and honestly, a matchup that I think is going to be super friendly for him because the Houston Texans have allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends to date of anyone else in the NFL. So you're looking at that matchup. You're looking at what Trey McBride has done of recent in weeks 8 and 10 specifically. 14 targets, 10 receptions, 95 yards, a touchdown. That was before Kyler Murray. Now with Kyler Murray, Murray's first game back, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 131 yards. One of those catches being the game-winning catch to seal the deal for the Arizona Cardinals. Not quite. They still had to get the 20-yard field goal, but it was a nice catch. It was very good for him, very good for the Cardinals to get a win. It's been quite a while. But, I mean, for a guy that's been on the rise of recent, a guy that we liked as a prospect last year who's, it's been really encouraging and really fun to see him finally be a real force for Arizona in a down year, but a year that I think is on the rise since Kyler Murray is back. When you look at the last 3 weeks and you compile all of the targets and all of the receptions that tight ends have gotten across the league, Trey McBride has ranked second over those last 3 weeks in overall targets, just behind TJ Hawkinson. He's been ahead of Cole Kmet, Njoku, Schultz, Ferguson, and Andrews. He is second overall in the last 3 weeks. So I think that really shows you just the streak that Trey McBride is on and could continue if he really proves to be this reliable target that Kyler Murray can lean on.
So we're getting to the point now in week 11. I'm going to start victory lapping a little bit. Okay, because we released a video, our last preseason running back rankings. We were notably lower than everybody else. Who else do you know that was telling you not to draft Tony Pollard this year?
No one.
Nobody. We were the only ones.
And
I say this, guys, knowing that we're wrong about plenty of things. We were dead wrong about Travis Etienne. It's not like we're perfect, but we got put through the ringer for this one. And here's a comment from one of the videos. The most liked comment on this video said, Pollard in the C tier is comical. We had him, I think, at the running back 11 or 12. So Tony Pollard through 10 weeks, rather. The running back 19. When you're looking at Tony Pollard in the last 4 weeks, 3 weeks, he had a bye. 5 points, 9 points, 6 points. Does that seem like somebody that should have been going in the top 2 rounds of
the
fantasy?
No. The late first at one point.
No, it doesn't. And honestly, everybody was just telling you what you wanted to hear because Tony Pollard was the sexy pick. Well, the sexy pick's losing you your league. So if you drafted him, I'm sorry. That being said, this week, I think you have to, because there are going to be people, and if you're smart, and if you're really playing fantasy like you should be playing fantasy, there are people that are considering not starting Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
He's absolutely, in some cases, not startable. It's just like James Cook or anybody else that you drafted that is not performing. He's not performing. This week, he probably will. They're playing the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers have given up the second most points to running back this year. The second most. Not to mention, touchdowns are volatile. Pollard hasn't had a lot of touchdowns this year at all. I would expect one to come maybe this week against the Panthers. But even when you're looking at the matchups that the Panthers have had this year, Mostert put up 34. Remember that game?
I do.
Kenneth Walker, 30. Algier, 24. Montgomery, 20. Bijan, 20. Jonathan Taylor, 18. Foreman, 17. Tony Jones, 15. Savon Ahmed, 12. Guys, if Savon Ahmed can get 12 points, I'm pretty sure Pollard can, right?
Yep.
But then again, it's Tony Pollard, and he's been massively disappointing. So would I be super surprised if he disappointed here? No, I wouldn't. And I'm not super surprised that what we are saying would come true, played out. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Yep, and we're going to close out here with a quarterback in Brock Purdy, who Purdy has never really been the most attractive, sexiest start any given week, but I think he's kind of consistently shown again and again that he is a must start, especially with this matchup. And yeah, during the 3-game skid, it wasn't quite what we've come to get used to with Brock Purdy, but we weren't used to seeing any of that with the 49ers. They didn't look great during that stretch. I think they showed that they're capable of doing a little bit more against Jacksonville when they beat them like 34-3. And I think as decent as the Bucs are, I do think this could be another route. The Bucs have allowed the 5th highest points to QBs this season. And they're just, I don't know what much else you want us to say in this situation. You can have your own opinion on Brock Purdy, the talent. I think objectively, the talent around Brock Purdy is like the best in the NFL, with the exception of maybe the Dolphins. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George. It's objectively the best. Never, I changed my mind.
It is
it's objectively the best, most well-rounded offense.
Then
Brock Purdy is he's just handed fantasy points by all of these guys that do everything after they catch for him. And the QBs against the Bucs, the top one, CJ Stroud 41, Josh Allen 30, Jared Goff 22, Hurts 21, Cousins 17. So you're seeing guys with rushing upside. You're seeing guys with little to no rushing upside just putting up clinics against this Bucs secondary as passers, and I think you gotta expect the same thing for Brock Purdy this week as well.
I do as well, and again, I expect some decent things from all these guys that we're saying are must starts this week. It's become a little bit easier as the season's gone on to kind of predict this stuff.
Yeah.
But do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy football, we're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before the season's over. So please subscribe for us. Drop a like on this video if this helped you out in any way with your lineup decisions or setting your lineup. We are, again, trying to grow the channel. It really helps us out when you do those two things. And again, flockfantasy.com/domain is where all of our exclusive content is. If you want our rest of season rankings to help you out with the playoffs and get a team review, we can tell you what last minute moves we'll be making for the trade deadline. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you later.